I'm Harvey Hildebrand, State Representative, District 53, and candidate for Texas Comptroller. I'm running because I have a vision for the office. I want to improve the office. I've been the Ways and Means Chairman in the Texas House and a member of the committee for 4 terms, Chairman for 2 terms, and in that position, besides being the Chief Tax Policy Maker in the legislature, I've also had the oversight responsibilities for the Comptroller's office. So I've learned what's working, what needs to be continued, like some of the transparency issues, some of the other initiatives that the current Comptroller has worked on. And I've also learned what parts of the Comptroller's office that need to be improved, primarily tax administration. I've laid out a 10-point plan. The first 6 points are on my website. We're running on that plan because it's specific, substantive proposals to address the concerns and the issues that need to be improved in the Comptroller's office. It's a 2,700 employee office, almost $500 million biennium and cost to run the agency, and there are a number of areas that we need to improve. Customer service, tax administration, making tax administration fair and more consistent, and I've also want to bring back the performance review function that is now at the Legislative Budget Board that used to be in the Comptroller's office, where it worked more effectively, and we were able to use it to pass legislation to streamline state government, make it more efficient, more effective, and save taxpayers money, because after all, the tax dollars are the people's money, and it's your money, and we need to make sure that we are stewards of that and we get the most value out of the dollars we spend on behalf of the taxpayers to serve that purpose.
Comptroller collects more than 60 types of taxes, fees. Some of them are pretty complicated. What can your office do to make, or what can the Comptroller's office do to make filing paperwork more easier for business?
Well, we can streamline it. We just yesterday I was working with a CPA and looking at the fact that Reese, in the last few years, a piece of information was changed on the margins tax return that made it more difficult and more bureaucracy. In fact, this CPA does 150 returns a year and was having to make 80 calls on 80 of those returns just to get one piece of information done. It wasn't available. So obviously we can streamline the paperwork. We can make the paperwork lessen the requirement paperwork, make it simpler, a shorter version, and quite frankly, that's a part of my Texas Taxpayer Bill of Rights that I proposed that you'll find on my website, harveyfortexas.com. I have a Texas Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It's linked right on the first page, front page of the deal of the website, which addresses 6 important points of tax administration and tax rights. Right now, the state has advantages over the taxpayer. The tax dispute process favors the state and gives the state rights that the taxpayer doesn't have. And so we've laid out a proposal to give those same rights to the taxpayer, so we have a fair process, we level the playing field, and taxpayers have a fighting chance in a tax dispute. And so it's everything from pay to play. You're required to pay your taxes up front, even if you've challenged them and you have a right to adjudicate that challenge. We get to pay ahead of time. But the state charges a higher interest rate when it owes you money, or when you owe it money, it charges you a higher interest rate. When it owes the taxpayer money in the form of a refund, it pays a lower interest rate. And that's one of the number of things that we've addressed. But if you pay to play, you have to pay to do an appeal, and you win the appeal, and you get your refund, and the state then pays you a lower interest rate than it would have charged you when you owe it money. So we've got 6 points in our Taxpayer Bill of Rights. The 7th is put it in the state constitution, so a future comptroller can't ignore it, can't get around it, and a future legislature has a challenge to change it, because the people have that right in the Constitution. It's very important. It's our #1 priority while we're running.
One of your 6 points says you want to protect the state from the IRS. Does the Comptroller have any actual power to fight them?
Yeah, let me explain that. The Comptroller's office has staff. I mentioned earlier 2,700 employees. Many of those are knowledgeable and have expertise in tax policy, both state and federal tax policy. Currently, the Comptroller's office and the IRS already talk to each other. There are established communication lines. There are people designated in the IRS to talk to people in the Texas Comptroller's office, and people in the Comptroller's office to talk to people in the IRS. So that's established. They work together to chase and fight tax fraud and go after tax cheats. When you already have people that know tax policy, both federal and state, that are working for you, and they're already talking to the IRS and have communication lines with them, and we find out whether a business owner calls us because they feel like they're being abused by the IRS, and in fact they're complying with the IRS and they're complying with the state of Texas, and they have their paperwork in order with us, but they're being abused by the IRS, or if a nonprofit organization or a Tea Party or a conservative club has been having their tax exempt status denied or delayed for a year, year and a half, 2 years, like we're finding out, then I think when an issue rises to the level of abuse by the IRS for Texans and those nonprofit organizations, somebody ought to step up for them. I think it makes perfect sense for the Comptroller's office to inquire to the IRS, what is the problem with this? We've looked at the paperwork, it's in compliance with us, what's the problem? This looks out of order. If they don't cooperate, if they don't want to cooperate, don't give an answer, we engage, we push, and if the level rises to abuse and they don't cooperate, then I think the Comptroller ought to have a press conference laying out the issue for the public to understand and put attention on that abuse and on that activity by the IRS, and that will cause the IRS to act responsibly. And we've seen that already. Last summer, when the IRS abuse case first came to the public's attention, we saw congressmen, Republican leaders, conservative leaders raise this very issue from their positions. And we also saw the media outlets cover it. When that happened, we saw tax exempt statuses for nonprofits and for Tea Parties and other grassroots organizations expedited and presented a year and a half, 2 years after they were first applied for. I'm convinced that if we inquire, engage, and then draw attention to these issues, that we can stop IRS abuse.
You still are the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, which oversees tax issues. In the last session, there were 60 bills that came out of there were 69 bills that came out of your committee and became law, and nearly half of them were authored or co-authored by Democrats. What are your thoughts on this, and should it be a concern for Republican voters?
Not at all. The people of Texas, the citizens of Texas, elect their representatives. Their representatives from another part of the state or from a different party should have the same rights and responsibilities as I do as a representative for my part of the state. And so when local bills are brought to the committee, most of those are going to be local bills that passed the major tax policy initiatives either I carried or co-authored or joint authored and worked with the leadership, the conservative leadership. I carried most of the major bills. Some of my colleagues, like Representative Jim Murphy in Houston, carried a major bill dealing with R&D, research and development, and some of the other important initiatives were carried by some of my colleagues. But we're a Democrat. Happens to carry a bill, of course he or she has a right to introduce a bill, has a right to have that bill be judged by its merits, has a right to have that bill, if there's thousands of bills introduced, so not every bill gets to have a hearing, not every bill gets set for a committee hearing and put on the agenda, but everybody has a right to have bills that merit support from the public, merit support within their colleagues in the legislature, regardless of what part of the state they represent or what party they happen to be a member of. We should put Texas first. I'm for Texas and what's best for Texas, and the conservative values I have fit what's best for Texas. And if different members have different opinions and different points of views, that's fine, but their bills should be judged on the merit of what those bills do for Texas and for the citizens of Texas. And if they have good legislation, they deserve to have those bills heard. And if they win the support of the committee and then ultimately the body itself, the 150 members of the House, and then the Senate, and go to the governor's desk, that's perfectly fine. That's the way the process is designed to work.
One of the big controversies facing the Comptroller's office last year was the Cancer Prevention Institute. Since the Comptroller was a board member, the Comptroller's not a board member anymore, but there was a lot of accusations of cronyism because there were a lot of donations being made to board members. What will you do to end the practice of crony capitalism in the Comptroller's office?
I'm concerned about it, and in this case, I'm glad that that law changed where some of the members of the CPREP board that were government officials and leaders of major agencies in the state are no longer on the board. But it raises a point about other areas, whether some of the corporate welfare, some of the areas where what in your words, crony capitalism may have happened. So I first of all have addressed, I'm going to be addressing in my 10-point plan, one of the next performance pledge items I'm going to be laying out is a deputy comptroller for ethics, and that's to make sure that we have the appropriate wall and barrier, and that we have somebody that's independent, that looks at the appropriateness of any relationships between an employee, a department head, or the comptroller, him or herself, so that we end that from happening.
Well, continuing on the subject, I know you touched on it a little bit, but the Comptroller's office is responsible for awarding business contracts.
That's what I was touching on.
Yeah, and would you be willing to publicly reject any attempts to offer you a donation from a company seeking or has already received a contract from the state?
Sure. I know that by law that many contractors with the state are already prohibited from making contributions to a couple of officers in the state, and one of them is the comptroller. Like investment firms and banks that manage state money, for instance, cannot contribute to the comptroller, and the comptroller can't accept those contributions. So where it's appropriate and where you have a similar situation as I've just described happen, of course, we should not allow the appearance of impropriety to happen, and certainly we ought to reform and prevent some of the issues that have occurred that are of concern to the citizens of Texas in the order of crony capitalism or corporate welfare or the awarding of contracts. That if a contract's awarded, it should be awarded to the best bid, to the bidder that is the best value for the taxpayers. That would be in cost and also in quality of service and quality of delivery on the requirement of that contract.
Some say Texas is facing a local debt crisis. We're number 2 in the country in municipal debt, number 1 in school district debt. Susan Combs started a program, Texas Transparency, to help raise awareness of this problem. Will you continue this program, and if so, do you have any plans to expand it?
Well, I do. I will continue it. That's one of the issues I mentioned when you introduced the program. I've identified a number of areas that I think are very good initiatives that the current comptroller has been behind, and I support those. And many of those deal with putting the state's checkbook online, encouraging local government to put their checkbooks online so we can see, so the public has the opportunity to find out how their money's being spent, what their money's being spent on, in all aspects of state and local finance. Also aware of the debt the state has and that local government has. So I support all those things. I think there are opportunities to expand it. I think there's opportunities to extend it to other areas outside of debt, and having the check register online where you can see just what the expenditures were and the check that was made out to pay that expenditure. There are other areas where we have state contracts, and those state contracts should be monitored to make sure that they're fully transparent. And I know of examples where state agencies use credit cards to buy items for on behalf of the state, and we need to make sure that's transparent, that it's the least expensive way to do it, that the rewards for those points are going, right now there's a state contract that says that any points that are used on a state credit card should go to the general revenue, and we bring in about between 100 and 200 million dollars in that program. So that's one that if we were aware of it, the transparency of that's important. Other opportunities to increase transparency so the public is aware of every detail about state finance that they want to know about should be available to them.
Do you support the idea of the Comptroller's office performing a new study on the economic impact of illegal immigration, and how do you think it would affect the immigration reform debate?
Absolutely. Here, I'm for increasing, well, first of all, I think the public ought to have the most accurate and up-to-date information available. The Comptroller's office performs some of these functions and has performed that very study, but it hadn't been updated in many years, and it needs to be updated. I think it should be updated and more frequently than it has in the past. You know, I don't know if I'm prepared today to say exactly, but it seems like every 2 or 3 years. I don't know that I'm ready to nail down, but certainly it hasn't been updated frequently enough, and I think 10 years is too far, and I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 5 years, 2 to 4 years probably would be a good number, but I will be, as we're evaluating these issues, we've been putting out statements on them, and so the specifics of exactly the timeliness of that is something we'll be coming out with, but certainly it should be done more frequently, and yes, it should be done. It's important for the public and their representatives to have the most accurate and up-to-date information possible, and that is in regarding this issue about the cost of illegal immigration to the state of Texas, whether the sales tax receipts that may be brought in by purchases by illegal aliens, and the cost of the population being here, and whether it's in our local hospital districts or local hospital authorities or the health care cost, housing cost, all the different areas, all that should be evaluated, and we should have an accurate and up-to-date report on that cost, and it should be updated frequently enough so the representatives can use it to make the best public policy possible.
So you do think this study should affect the immigration reform debate?
Well, the point of it is the Comptroller's office should be doing its job to provide the information that will be available for the public to use in any way they see fit, and the representatives of our citizens, whether it be in the U.S. Congress or whether it be in the state legislature, will have that information available to make the best public policy, and that should be available, and I'm for that. And so yes, I want to see it updated and do a brand new benchmark, compare it to the old benchmark, see what's happened, make that evaluation, that analysis, and then update it more frequently and use that so we have the best information and most accurate and up-to-date information available.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
How can people find out more about your campaign?
My website is harveyfortexas.com. Go to that website. You'll have the opportunity to see a video on the front page that introduces me, biographical background, introduces my campaign, talks about the IRS issue and some other issues. There's a link right under that for our Texas Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which is very important and the #1 priority when I'm elected, and a number of other pages of background information. The 10 points, the first 6 are on the website today for our performance pledge. You can endorse me, you can sign up for updates, you can like us on Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter. So we welcome questions, we welcome, we would love for the public to contact us and to learn more about our campaign. I'm running because I have a vision for the office, and I actually know what I want to accomplish once I'm elected. And pursuing those objectives and accomplishing those objectives once I'm elected are paramount and can help grow the Texas economy by cooperating with the Texas business community to help grow the economy by sending them the right signals and giving them clarity to their questions about tax administration and other state finance issues, and being cooperative and not adversarial. So these are the kinds of issues I'm running on. I've laid them out specifically. I've laid out specific proposals to address them and improve the office, and I hope that people will visit my website and learn more about the campaign.
Thank you, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.